So I'll show that to you. Lots to get to, so let's get started. Raquel Dancho says, it is unacceptable that no one has been held accountable for Beijing's illegal operation of multiple police stations in Canada. The Liberals must explain why the RCMP is not equipped with the tools they need to make arrests of Beijing agents violating Canadian sovereignty. They've been operating with people's knowledge in Canada for months. Nothing's been done. Everybody's done absolutely nothing. It's pretty wild. Robert Fife says the FBI finds Canadian link in covert Chinese police station probe. Ooh, a Canadian link. Yes, here's that link. One of the two men arrested for allegedly operating a secret police station for China in Manhattan has photographic evidence on his phone of the opening of a similar covert station in Canada, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation says. Liu Jinwang, 61, and Chen Jinping, 53, you think there's a relation? Nah. 59. Were arrested Monday on charges of conspiring to act as agents of China's government without informing U.S. authorities and obstruction of justice. Last year, Spain-based human rights watchdog Safeguard Defenders exposed a network of illegal police stations run for Chinese authorities in Canada, the U.S., and around the world. It initially identified more than 50 of them, but later expanded the estimate to more than 100 globally. A document filed in a Brooklyn federal court this month said Mr. Liu's smartphone contained a photograph of ceremonies to commemorate the opening of Chinese overseas police stations in 5 countries, including Canada. Among the people depicted in a collection of other photos on the phone were associated presidents from Spain, France, Canada, and the Netherlands. An affidavit in support of Monday's arrest warrant said. In Canada, it's not clear what the RCMP have been making headway in the matter. In a December 22 report, Safeguard Defenders identified what it believed were 4 illegal Chinese police stations in Canada. And this article goes through the not much we've done about it, including driving around in front, walking around in front, marching around in front. Canada Proud says, why won't Trudeau or the RCMP do anything about this? True North News says, unlike Canada, America's Department of Justice lays charges on agents accused of operating a Chinese police station in their country, right? The U.S. Department of Justice announced Monday that the FBI have arrested 2 people on charges of operating a secret police station in New York City on behalf of China's regime, not unlike the Chinese police stations that have operated across Canada and still are in some cases. According to the Epoch Times, the U.S. prosecutors say Li Jinwang and Chen Jinping, 59, conspired to work as agents of the Chinese Communist Party and took orders from the regime in order to track down and silence Chinese dissidents living in America. So that's pretty wild stuff. And the Americans can respond. And while Corey Morgan says, quote, he told the MPs that Mounties nevertheless parked vehicles in front of the 4 suspected illegal police stations to show their presence. I don't think it intimidated them. They know they have a connection or 20 in Parliament. So they're running our elections. Parking the RCMP out front will have them call Trudeau and say, why is the RCMP parked out front? Rebel News is reporting mainstream journalist fails to question Trudeau about his brother reportedly accepting controversial funds. This isn't about his brother reportedly accepting controversial funds. The thing is, the mainstream journalists understand that if they ask tough questions, they'll be removed from whatever proceeding they're at. It's pretty incredible. There's a whole Rebel report talking about how the mainstream journalists are not asking Trudeau these tough questions. And it's interesting. So it's linked in the description. I'm not going to play it right now, but I will play this one. This illustrates perfectly. This was in the Danielle Smith mix, but it's not in the Danielle Smith mix now because I moved it up. Because it illustrates perfectly what happens when you step out of line and dare to ask questions that people like Rachel Notley don't want to ask. They're just like the Liberals. They don't answer questions they don't like. In fact, they'll get their security guards, this guy right here, right, to take you out and lecture you on how you're not allowed to question people, and won't answer questions about the rules or the rule of law or the freedom of the press or anything like that. They just say, I don't know, it's my job to make sure you can't ask questions. That's it. But this little cut together is fantastic. It is absolutely wonderful. I'm going to make it actually full desktop, I think. And go.
And I want to make it very clear that I'm happy to take any questions from the media and any follow-up questions.
Remember that, it's important.
Thank you for your saying that you would take questions and follow-up questions.
I'm going to take that as your affirmation of openness and transparency when you're dealing with the media. Why has your party cut us off from receiving the NDP press releases and media advisories?
Something's fishy, Alfred.
As much as we have in the past taken questions from your bosses, your institution, we will not be answering questions.
What?
I thought you said...
Happy to take any questions from the media and any follow-up questions.
That doesn't make sense!
Oh, wait, there's one more.
With all due respect, it's really not for politicians to say that we will talk to this people and not to those people, because are we not all fighting the same election, and are we not all in good standing with both the national and the provincial party? Your Saskatchewan wing of the NDP fields all our questions and sends us their advisories. Why won't you do the same?
So I'm happy to take other questions from folks.
You see minutes earlier.
Thank you very much, and I want to make it very clear that I'm happy to take any questions from the media and any follow-up questions.
Rachel! Rachel!
Rachel, what are you doing?
How appropriate do you think it is, whether it's the Premier or yourself and your party, to choose which journalists can take questions?
Well, as I've said before, and I said earlier today, clear that I'm happy to take any questions from the media.
That was a test. I was testing you.
They're not going to entertain your questions. So
They're not going to entertain my questions.
Right. So it's as plain as that.
That's the NDP position.
That's right. So,
I mean, the Premier took questions from me. So did the Mayor of Calgary.
I mean, whatever they do is their bailiwick, right?
What just happened? Did they do that?
Happy to take any questions from the media.
Yikes, right? And so it's not believable when they behave in such a craven way. They won't answer questions. They won't clarify their position. It's such a frustrating thing. And the mainstream news understands that if they step out of line, buddy, they might be talking to the security. And that's not good. That might get back to their bosses. Macaronis, right? And the independents don't care about talking to the bosses. So Rachel Notley says, you're not legitimate. I'm not going to answer your questions. This is a move to silence at the source somebody's ability to ask questions, report on anything, because you can't make news if you don't answer any questions to that person, right? So it's interesting, and it's a strategy, and I hope it's one that gets smushed out, because we have freedom of the press in this country. And it would be interesting to see if there's going to be a charter challenge, if Keane's going to run a charter challenge against Notley, something to that effect. I don't know. Very interesting, because there could be legal implications. But again, I'm not holding my breath for the court system or the legal system to come to the rescue. I think our court system is not. It stood by. I still don't think we have an Oakes test for COVID. It stood by while all the COVID restrictions and rule by press conference and edict happened, and our rights were second, and they still are. And the rights and freedoms and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that got passed 40 years ago or something like that today or yesterday was ignored. It was not worth even wiping your bum with it. It didn't do a darn thing for most people, and so that's unfortunate. So hopeful that something might happen, but I don't know. Here's Harry Larry. They say they're referring to Blacklock's reporter, and I showed you this yesterday, but I wanted to show you the source of this. So Blacklock's reporter is Canadian Health Canada is identifying capitalism as a root cause of climate change. Also, quote, if we don't address colonialism, we're going to tread water and eventually drown. Here's the website, and you can download the report here. And you can see the report. I've just got it up here. And this is 5 guiding messages to inform. This is kind of the wrap up of the report. This is on page 57, just before the appendix. So this is, if you take nothing away from this report, take this from the report. 5 guiding messages emerged to inform such bold and transformative action for public health in Canada. 1, human health and well-being depend on healthy ecosystems. 2, systemic drivers of negative health outcomes are climate change, overlap, white supremacy, capitalism, colonialism, and racism must be addressed. Barriers to addressing climate change and public health are known and must be addressed systemically. There is vision and local leadership for addressing health and climate change within the public health field if it is given the latitude, capacity, and investments to rise to the challenges. You'd have to have an entire police force to roll out this vision. Public health and well-being must be centered in decision-making across all sectors and all levels of government. So scary, scary stuff. Blacklock's reporters reporting again. Budget officer testifies, has the government lost control of its spending? I don't know, as he marvels over projected $500 billion yearly budgets and deficits as far as the eye can see. Balance in 2070, 2080. Yesterday, I talked about a graph shown by the CBC. Maybe I didn't talk about this graph. I saw it yesterday. And initially I saw the graph on the right, and I didn't notice the little wavy lines that jumped 10 million in value. So the left-hand chart is not correct. And so the red bar, the size of the red bar is artificially small. And I knew that it was artificially small. Somebody pointed it out, but they didn't correct it. And Jordan Peterson corrected it. He made a graph with the proper numeration on the left-hand side without the little wavy lines. So it doesn't jump, it doesn't miss 10,000 million or 10 million points on the graph. He added those back in. And it was just 10 points, but it makes a big difference in the visual of the graph, like a huge difference in the visual of the graph. And this is the funding for the CBC. So Jordan Peterson says on the left, the original CBC bar graph indicating government spending in pink with conveniently placed tide. On the right, my corrected version. Is the CBC government funded and apt to lie about it? Draw your own conclusion. So did they do this? Did they make this visual lie on purpose? It seems that yes, they did. They did that to mislead their viewers and make it look like the revenue was a big portion of their operating costs or a big portion of their total revenue, their total funding. Okay. But it's not, because when you actually take that little tide out, right, it looks like the government is giving a whole bunch of money to these people, a lot, like way more than their revenue. And if they were worthwhile, they wouldn't need all that. How could we spend all that much money and get absolutely nothing, or the garbage nonsense that we do get from CBC? How could we spend all that money and get that? That's yearly. Anyway, thanks Jordan Peterson for doing that. It helps. It really does helps understand very quickly what the how it boils down to brass tacks, and also helps people understand just how much the CBC is lying through different mechanisms and means. Okay, this is a visual lie, and they did that on purpose. That was a purposeful lie. James Melville's talking about money printing and inflation, and how money printing encourages inflation, contributes to inflation, is the cause of inflation. He says UK inflation remains above 10%. One of the reasons for this is because of the rampant quantitative easing program, that's £400 billion since 2020. The lockdown era of magic money printing helped cause the inflation spike. Printing money devalues the currency, a giant Ponzi scheme. Yes, here's Elon Musk kind of breaking it down as well with Tucker. I think it's a good exchange. Here we go.
So inflation is going to happen no matter what. If you increase the money supply, you get inflation.
Right.
So there's not some magical cure for getting rid of inflation, except to increase the productivity, the output of goods and services. So if you say like what is money? You've got these sort of it's basically numbers in a database that sum up to some total. Then you've got the output of goods and services of the economy, and as long as the ratio of money to ratio of goods and services stays, if that stays constant, you have no inflation. If you add more money, if you add money to the system faster than you increase goods and services, right, then you have inflation. So all of these COVID sort of stimulus bills were not paid for. They just generated more currency, more money was created because the federal government, the checks always pass, unless you hit a debt limit, which there's probably going to be some debt limit crisis later this year. But provided you haven't hit the debt limit, the federal government, unlike state governments or city governments or individuals, can simply issue more money, and that's what they did. I mean, as the old saying goes, that there's no free lunch. So if you could just issue massive amounts of money without negative consequences, why don't we just take that to the limit and make everyone a trillionaire? They tried that in Venezuela. How'd that work out?
Well, they had to eat zoo animals.
Right. It's not good, you know. There's no free lunch. There's not
So fundamentally,
some ability to issue money and not have inflation.
Many of those kind of.
right, there's going to be consequences. And we're seeing the consequences. Here's CP24, gas prices in Ontario to soar to 5-month high on Wednesday. Yay. I don't know, man. I think people are not prepared for what is coming, I think. And that is not great. Not good. Here's CTV News. They say, slap in the face. Freeland's Disney Plus comment made her a villain. Who was the biographer for George Soros? There's a picture of Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, and George Soros hanging out. She was a villain long before she said cancel Disney Plus. This is a puff piece that doesn't address Chinese infiltration in our government, is a distraction from the C11 trying to take away our free speech. There are things that are important that our news should be talking about, but they're not. And that's interesting, right? And it's not good. It's just interesting. Maxime Bernier says, Canada is seeing violent crime like never before. What's behind the wave of killings and attacks? It's Trudeau's Bill C-75, a 2018 series of amendments to the criminal code that lets repeat offenders off the hook. There you go. If you're a violent criminal, you get off the hook. I bet you if you fight back, if you're a person who fights back, you don't get seen as somebody who deserves pity or the law to go easy on you, et cetera, et cetera. See Tamara Lich, see the guys who are still in jail from Coots, all of that stuff, right? Unbelievable stuff that's happening in regards to the freedoms that are enjoyed, that used to be enjoyed by Canadians. We don't have those anymore. We don't. And it's unfortunate and it's sad, and I wish it weren't true, but. Here, Polyev is trying to hold Justin Trudeau accountable for Vacation Gate #2. He talks about this. I'm not going to play the clip here. He says, I asked Justin Trudeau 4 times how much he paid to stay on the beach with his Trudeau Foundation buddies. While Canadians struggle to put food on the table, Trudeau is answering for the second time in as many months why he stayed at a place that costs more per night than the average Canadian makes in a month. Question. Awakened Richard says, typical Trudeau deflect and blame others for his shortcomings. This is an exchange. And again, it's just kind of, not that it's clunky. It's just, I think it's a distraction from the core real issue of what's going on in our country. The freedom of speech being removed, our ability to hold our leaders accountable being removed, the immigration that is flooding our cities, are everywhere. Everything that is happening is because of bad policy. And we're arguing over Trudeau's vacation. It just irks me because it's not important and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Here's Trudeau, 14 seconds saying we're friends and godfathers and so on and so forth. But again, it irks me spending so much time on this because, I mean, okay, it's a $165,000 taxpayer trip. It's a waste of money. Should his government fall because of it? Yes, but it should have fallen a whole bunch from Jody Wilson-Raybould way back when. So do it already, right? Jagmeet Singh is just fine with it. So this seems like a distraction from the real things that could explode into a scandal that would actually take down his government. I feel like we're being led around by the nose, and that's one of those stories that I feel like that for. Viva Fry says the person. So the other day, do you remember this exchange where Trudeau says, "You're a Christian. Oh, does that mean you're against Muslims?" He's like, "What? No, I just don't believe in abortion." It's interesting that Trudeau went there. But this whole thing was staged, according to Viva Fry, and the person doing the filming gives the plan away. Viva Fry says the person fortunate to be filming this setup, I mean, this totally spontaneous event, happens to be Kevin Schroff, a Democratic commentator and political organizer. Definitely not set up. People get this close to Justin Trudeau all the time. Who is the kid in the video while the internet is searching for answers? And again, this is a minor story, but it's an interesting one. It's PR. It's meant to change the page. It's meant to kick off a conversation about women's health, abortion, and all of the rest, where Justin Trudeau looks like the hero to the left, right? And the PPC kid, everybody was saying, oh, you need to rethink it, guy. Okay. Conservative Party this is free speech now, moving on. The Conservative Party is noticing that Justin Trudeau has already started to censor Canadians. We're being asked, and the Senate is being asked, by Pablo Rodriguez. He says it's time to move on as they debate passing Bill C-11 as is, or if they'll insist on their changes. And Pablo Rodriguez wants them to just move on already. And here is think this is Senator Batters. No, this isn't Denise Batters. This is Kuzi, Stephanie Kuzi, I think. Okay, we'll find out in just a second. It'll flash her name across the bottom probably. She's talking here about how the liberals are already censoring the internet. They're already engaging in this, and we're supposed to believe that they're not going to engage in internet censorship when they have control of the internet. It's a nightmare, guys. It is. It's really a nightmare. Not that I didn't think that we'd get to this point, but I didn't think it would be so easy. They tried once to pass this a couple of years ago, and it failed. And they changed the senators enough, and now it looks like it'll pass, because as we live in a country that has been corrupted by Chinese influence. Here is this conservative MP, name pending.
On Bill C-11 and C-18, we know that this government is abundantly committed.
It was Rachel Thomas.
To censoring what people can see, post, or hear online. But what we just learned is that the Prime Minister actually got a head start. You see, according to government documents that were put in place here, tabled in the House of Commons, the Liberals actually pressured social media companies a total of 214 times. 214 times over the period of 24 months. Talk about heavy-handed. Why is this government so committed to censoring speech?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, you can't spell conspiracy without CPC. Another day, another conspiracy theory.
Well, what we know for certain is that this government will do all that it can to dodge or deflect questions that it doesn't want to answer. There's nothing conspiratorial about a document that was tabled right here in the House of Commons that shows that this government pressured social media platforms 214 times within 24 months to remove content that it simply found embarrassing or didn't want the public to be aware of. So I'll ask again, why is this government so hell-bent on censoring freedom of speech in the country of Canada?
If you base your election on that, people might change their minds a little bit on their position. But the government and Pablo Rodriguez, all of these people are trying to get this thing passed, because once it's passed, it really won't matter what people think. You will be told what to think, and the news will tell you. And if you don't kowtow to it, you will be labeled an extremist, and you'll be silenced further or sent to a struggle session or maybe fired. They're building this kind of society, and they want you to just turn a blind eye to it. It's scary stuff. Here's CTV News on the Pablo Rodriguez stuff. Time to move on, Minister says, while as Senate debates passing Bill C-11 without further changes. Senators returned to the upper chamber on Tuesday and quickly began debating a motion that would see the Senate accept Bill C-11, the Online Streaming Act, without insisting on further changes. As the minister responsible tells them, quote, "It's time to move on." The federal Liberal government's representative in the Senate, Senator Mark Gold, introduced a motion seeking the Senate to agree to the version of the bill, C-11, as the House of Commons signed off on it last month, and not insist on the several amendments that the majority of MPs voted down. The Senate has three possible practical responses to this message. It can concur, it can insist on its amendments, or it can make a new proposal within the scope of the disagreement. Today I'm asking this chamber to concur with the decision of our fellow parliamentarians in the other place, a decision that is clear, informed, carefully considered, and which comes to us following a robust and vigorous debate in a minority parliament, Gold said, speaking to his motion. This bill removes basic charter rights from Canadians with no Oakes test that I'm aware of, and no consultation that was realistic, no real debate. They rushed the debate, as Michael Geist very, very well documented. So scroll down a little bit. This is the article again. After a few hours of debate, senators moved on without resolution, though after years of discussion, study, and modifications to the initial piece of legislation, it appears there's some desire within the Senate to see this chapter come to an end soon. And they're saying this bill has spent the most time in the Senate history in the history of Canada. It's great to be a part of Senate history. We have made a huge contribution, and I feel now it's time for us to move on. Right, but the whole thing is not a good thing at all. Here's one more quote. Quote, "I've been in this place now for 15 years, and excuse me if I'm just a little bit skeptical of taking any government at face value. I, as a legislator, would like to see things in the law in black and white," said Conservative Senator Housakis, who leads the Senate committee's marathon study on Bill C-11. right? But he's being sidelined quite a lot. So and that's frustrating because I think it's not Canadian. It doesn't align with our values. Free speech is the cornerstone of any democracy. If you remove freedom of speech, they will silence people. They'll be wrong about who they silence, and they will double down on their errors in order to protect themselves from public backlash. We're already seeing it. And so here is Stephen, and he says, government-funded broadcaster objects to truth in labeling. This is Reuters, and I thought this was funny. As a headline, it made me laugh. Trudeau and rival clash over Twitter labeling CBC government-funded. So the rival, of course, is Pierre Poilievre, but they didn't want to give him any stage time in the headline, right? Oh, Trudeau and that other guy. That forgettable other guy who's not Trudeau. Our media, man. But Reuters is kind of American media, so are they just helping other Democrats out? Does Trudeau work with the Democrats? I'm not sure. Because I think Reuters is fundamentally an American outlet, right? We don't have a Reuters Canada, do we? Or is Reuters Canadian? I don't think it's Canadian. Anyway, back to Pablo Rodriguez. He says, it's no secret that conservatives want to cut into the CBC's local coverage. What's new is Pierre Poilievre running to U.S. billionaires to help weaken the public broadcaster. Our job is to answer tough questions, not to try to silence journalists we disagree with. They are trying to silence journalists they disagree with. He says the reality is that CBC's independence is protected by law and its budget is voted on by Parliament, not the government. We know all too well what happens when politicians twist the facts and treat the media as the enemy. We can't let that happen in Canada. And MJ says the Parliament is government. He's trying to say, oh, it's not government done, it's Parliament. Yeah, it's the same thing. The label isn't silencing anything. It's simply stating a fact. Facts must be hard for you. So it's interesting when Pablo Rodriguez is losing his mind over the labeling of CBC as government-funded media when it's in the name. And again, I think it's another distractionary story. And this is just distractionary nonsense. But Pablo Rodriguez is doing a video about it. It's a minute long. A minute, 5 seconds. We're not going to listen to it because I listened to the first 15 seconds and I got bored. But Tokyo Rose says, when Pablo says journalists are fundamental to our democracy, he means CBC journalists. I wonder if he felt the same way when Trudeau's independent advisory board banned Rebel News from obtaining their QCJO licenses. So, right, when Trudeau says these journalists are no good, they can't come to the debate. Those journalists took the law to a courtroom and said, this is what the law says, and this is what the government is saying, and the government was found to be incorrect. They're not even going to have that check and balance when they silence people on the internet. You're not even going to know. They just disappear. Gone. And it'll be a digital disappearance. Poof, gone. Gone. That's it. So that's pretty interesting, don't you think? I think it is very interesting. Jonathan says, this is the Green Party deputy leader. And he says, "I from Kiev? Why is the Green deputy leader in Kiev?" First question. And he's really angry at Pierre Poilievre for attacking journalists. Again, it's a bullshit distraction story from being focused on China and the interference in our elections. But I can't believe he's in Kiev. So here we go.
Hi, Pierre. Hi from Kiev. Your attacks on CBC, your attacks on Radio-Canada, honestly, you're putting the lives of journalists at risk. You're putting the integrity of our institutions at risk. You're putting Canada at risk by allying yourself with an American dude, an American billionaire, to fight off the independence of Canadian media, putting journalists at risk.
What is he talking about? Being labeled state media, how does that put journalists at risk? Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It's in the name. Holy cow. Everybody's gone bonkers. Everybody's lost their mind. Here is Citizens for Sanity. And it's 30 seconds video, and I think that it's worthwhile, so we'll listen to it. Here we go.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. You hear these words everywhere, in school, business, and government. But what do these words actually mean? What is equity all about? It's left-wing code for whites and Asians not welcome. It means punishing workers and students based on their race. It means prioritizing trans job seekers over straight ones. Democrats call this equity. We know it's bigotry, and it must be defeated. Paid for by Citizens for Sanity. Diversity.
Do we have Citizens for Sanity in Canada? I think that's a U.S. ad. I thought it was interesting. thought I'd show you. There are people out there who are saying, this all sounds like dog whistle politics to us. Sure does. Andrew Coyne, I don't